But I do like the makeup of the team. And the big talking points, obviously, at 13, with Henry Slade having played 55 minutes for Exeter on Sunday, straight back in, 6-day turnaround to face the All Blacks, which is fine. But he hasn't played since the summer. If you watch the Exeter Quins game on Sunday, which we both did, because we love our ruggers, but he did physically put it about. He was flying into tackles. I saw a tap tackle that he made on the way back where he threw himself into the spokes, which if there was any question marks over a dodgy shoulder, you ain't doing that, are you?
Oh, the tap tackle. The tap tackle is the one. If you've got a dodgy shoulder, you ain't tap tackling your kids. So, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, that the change up with the mindset around Steve Borthwick and Henry Slade is changed massively. The fact that he wasn't in the World Cup squad and now he is clearly first choice. He got one of these contracts that we're all talking about as well. But if not him, then who? Who was the other 13 option? I think that's maybe what people are asking. I couldn't work out who it was. Obviously, Ollie Lawrence is the 12, but who would have been the 13? Would it have been a Freeman? I know that he's played there as well this season. Who else?
I suppose the two options he had was to put Lozowski straight in as a like-for-like replacement
of course.
At 13, but Loza hasn't played Test rugby, I think, since Japan 6 years ago or something, before when Eddie Jones was involved in that game where he banished Alex Lozowski and Danny Kerr for a long, long time because it was an average performance and they were the scapegoats. But yeah, you either do that or you put Freeman to 13 and then put Slightholme on the wing potentially. But is that changing too many people when Slady played 55 minutes and he's integral to that defensive system, which the question marks around that with the change from Felix Jones to Joel Alabt will be interesting to see coming up against the All Blacks, who, let's be honest, are going to test you in that channel. They're going to test you as a complete rugby team. If what I don't understand in the selection, I'm really positive about the starting 15, going a 6-2 bench and having the only other outfield back outside of scrum half being George Ford, who only covers 10. That's a big worry and a risk for me. But let's start with the positive, James. Let's start with the starting team and your thoughts on it, because I was pretty impressed and I like the look of the team.
Yeah. Well, on the covering in the backs, he's said that Ben Earl will cover centre, which is interesting in itself. All right, Eddie, what would Eddie do? That's what he would do. But yeah, I think we're looking at the team. England have got a good team. They've got players that are in form. I think Ellis Genge starting at loosehead is definitely the right call. Jamie George as captain as well was always going to be that case. You've got Theo Dan to come on. He will come on early after 45, 50 for sure. Second row, love the look of that with Marrow and George Martin. Both banging form. Well, internationally, they're both banging form. Marrow is back up there with the best second rows in the world at the minute. And the profile of the back row is always going to be a talking point, isn't it? I know no Sam Underhill, which was a big one for me. Would have I started Sam Underhill? Maybe just because of how well he played in the final, how well he plays for England. He's a test match animal. But you look at the players that he's up against in Tom Curry, who, when he came off the bench, was unbelievable. He looked like a level above in terms of physicality and carrying. And the back row is a big talking point for England because the strength and depth they've got. Tom Willis, we spoke about it on the pod that came out on Tuesday morning. Phenomenal player in form, Tom Pearson, but Chandler Cunningham South, friend of the show. The big talking point, is he a 6, is he a 8? I don't think it really matters. I think you've got the balance of the back row right. You've got a back row jumper in Chandler Cunningham South, and you've got two physical specimens, ball in hand and defensively, in Tom Curry, brother Ben on the bench, and Ben Earl, who has been one of England's form players over the last couple of years. Now, I don't know what the running meters and who's fitter and who's faster, but you can see Sam Underhill starting against South Africa because of the way that he plays defensively, physically at the line. Is he slightly more physical in the tackle than Tom Curry? I think so, from what I've seen. So, again, the embarrassment of riches they've got in the back row, that must be the hardest decision for them, and there'll be reasons why. But it's great to see Tom Curry back playing again after that injury that he's had. But you look at that England team that they've got. We'll talk about Ben Spencer at 9. We both agree that he's probably the form 9 in England. No Alex Mitchell through injury, who was first choice. But just great players to choose from in form. And it's going to be a tough day at the office for New Zealand. But as we know, New Zealand are a world-class outfit as well, with some world-class players. Physically, that's going to be the thing. It's going to be the physicality. I think New Zealand have lost a little bit of sparkle around their attacking game, and I think some of that lies around their 9 and 10. Cam Roygaard's back for them at scrum half. He played against Japan. Big fan of him. He had a nasty injury that could have been a lot worse, but he's great. But then the 10, Damien McKenzie, wicked off the bench, like world class, one of the best players we've ever seen off the bench, or I've certainly seen off the bench in terms of making an impact. But is it Beauden Barrett at 10? You've got the centres in Rico Ioane and Geordie Barrett. We don't know who they're going to go. Like you said, Goody, to me, that there was clips of him kicking the other week, so he's clearly fit. But it's I don't want to say it's a must-win game for England, but off the back of the tour...
Oh, it is.
It is. It is. Yeah, because New Zealand, I don't want to sound negative when I say this, they're under a bit of pressure. And we were chatting about them during the championship as well. Razor's under a little bit of pressure. A few changes around the team. Some of the players are playing in Japan. Like, there's a bit of a fractured nature around New Zealand rugby at the minute. And they are there for the taking. But it's New Zealand. It's the All Blacks. They're the finalists. They're iconic. And they're not doing a Haka, apparently. As Joe said.
We'll get onto that in a minute. But you're right about New Zealand. And I suppose the worrying thing for England is the last time this team played together, or as close to it as possible, was in New Zealand in the summer. Now, New Zealand, that was back in July. New Zealand have probably played 7, 8 tests since then. So they've got better and they've got more cohesive together. So we played them back to back in New Zealand at the start of their season, internationally, that is, when they were just coming together. So have they got progressively better? 100% think they have. Players like Wallace Atiti has gone through the roof. Tuipulotu's back as well. Ardi Surveyor, I saw his interview yesterday. He's talking up the England players, but he just looks hungry and wants to go out at Twickenham and maim people. So you can talk about the big names, but I think their cohesiveness is going to be way better than it was in the summer for what England faced. And England are first up. It's always tough playing a big team first up, isn't it? Ideally, you'd want Japan as a warm-up, like we did when we went over to New Zealand, and then go New Zealand, South Africa, Australia to finish with an easy one. So it'd be interesting. I think New Zealand are ready for the taking because their nature is to play an all-court game, isn't it? And Beauden Barrett or Damien McKenzie are fly halves that can cut you to shreds or run up their own arse and cause their own team trouble against a blitz. So I'm hoping England can come out and go after them in that sense. And off the back of that, it's 30-0 to England at half-time as opposed to the All Blacks.
Yeah, best back three, I reckon the All Blacks have in this Autumn Nations series. Caleb Clark has been on fire. He's been on fire. Mark Talea, we saw him at the World Cup, was unbelievable as well. Sevu Reece, Will Jordan, he's a hitman when it comes to scoring tries. So, yeah, and that's going to be the big thing. I'm interested to see who they pick at 10 because I know in New Zealand that has been the conversations being had. Is it a Beauden Barrett or is it Damien McKenzie who wants to play at 10? It's going to be a class game.
Yeah. They went back to Beauden Barrett, didn't they, towards the back end of the Rugby Championship after backing McKenzie for the majority of it. So that is a big point. McKenzie started against Japan last week, and I read somewhere that people were saying he failed his assignment, but they put 60-odd points on Japan. So really interesting to see that 9-10 selection. Do they go experience of TJ Perenara, or do they go Roygaard, who's brilliant, or Cortez Ratima as well, who's done really well off the bench? So you've got 87 caps in TJ Perenara, or under 10 caps in Roygaard or Cortez Ratima. So I think people are talking big things about Roygaard, aren't they?
Yeah, brilliant player.
So, I mean, the energy they're going to bring and want to attack from, that will either cut England to shreds at times, or it will play into England's hands with their blitz and go after them properly. Well, just to finish on the England team, which I like, and it kind of picks itself, with Mitchell being out injured, Ben Spencer starts at 9, and I couldn't believe this stat that came out. This is his first test start at 32 years of age. He has been ripping it up in the Prem for years, and his box kicking game is going to be crucial. When you mentioned, Jim, the back three that New Zealand have. So I'm delighted for him. And you've played with him. What are your thoughts?
He's ready.
He ready?
He is ready. And even I think if Mitchell was fit, I would have gone for Ben Spencer. And there's a little bit of bias there because I played with Ben. I look at the final, and I know Steve Borthwick has referenced the final of how well Ben Spencer played in that final against Alex Mitchell. Remember him tapping his arm in the final, just getting stuck into it. Yeah. But I think internationally, it suits Ben Spencer. And I'm the same. I couldn't believe the stat. He was on the bench in 2019. Do you remember he got called up to the final? Hell of a picture, but never played. And the fact that he's never started a game for England. He's 32. He's ready. I know that he'll be desperate, but I think the way that he plays, the way that he controls a game, he's almost like a 10 playing 9 with his understanding of the game, the kicking, he can kick at goal. His box kicking is clearly his superpower, which started at Saracens, and we know is a big part when you play in international rugby. I'll say it again. I feel like he's ready, and I think his moment is now to take that 9 jersey. And what better game to do it against New Zealand, where I'm not going to say that their weakness is in the high ball compete, but we know that in Emmanuel Feo-Aboso, Tommy Freeman, George Furbank, that the box kicking part to England's game and the way that they play, that short kicking game as well, is suited to someone like Ben Spencer.
Has Marler unblocked you lads on Twitter yet then? Did you see his tweet last night about the Haka?
He's blocked everyone. He's now come off Twitter because I went on to see, or X, if he was still blocking me, and he's taken his profile down. Context, Andrew, give the context, please, for the listeners if they're not on social media. But my goodness me, he's fueled the fire without even stepping into the fire or near a fire.
Well, he's in the squad, isn't he? He just didn't get picked. So maybe he's just chucking a hand grenade in there because he's not involved in the matchday 23 because Finn Baxter's on the bench, as Arlu said, prop. But Joe Marler stoked the fire on Twitter last night as he tweeted, "The Haka needs binning. It's ridiculous." Followed by another tweet, "It's only good when teams actually front it with some sort of reply," like the league boys did last week.
I don't want to say this, but I feel like I have to. Okay.
He's a clown.
Poor Finn Baxter. Oh. No, poor Finn Baxter. Imagine Offa Tuungafasi or Tyrrell Lomax walking towards Finn Baxter. What are you doing, brother?
Yeah.
I'm walking away from the troubles in my life. I mean, it's a Joe Marler thing to say. It genuinely doesn't affect me. It builds up a little bit of the story. We were chatting about the rugby league incident, the late Norm Hewitt and Richard Cockrell thing that was so iconic over the years. I would love to see another way of facing the Haka. I've always said it. I think having it closer, I love the Haka. We've spoken about it on here. I do feel, and I've mentioned this before, so this isn't the first time I've said it, I do feel as if it's been exhausted a little bit, but I think building the theatre around it is amazing. And it's a Joe Marler thing to say, right? As in, it's the words that he used as opposed to the thought around it. The fact that he said it was ridiculous. It's not ridiculous. It holds such cultural currency within that country. It's iconic in sport, in rugby. And it isn't just about doing a dance to scare the opposition and to build hysteria. It has much more deep meaning than that. So out of Joe Marler's tweet, the one thing is the fact that he says it's ridiculous. It's not ridiculous. It's heritage, it's history, and it's culture. But that's our Joe.
Yeah. I mean, he's not our Joe. He's a clown. But I love it. I've said it on here before. I get tingles down the spine and in other places when I see the Haka. It's what I genuinely tune in for it, to watch it and see the tongues hanging out, see how hard they look, see Perinara going wild. But it means a lot to those guys. It is a DNA of the All Blacks, right? And yes, I agree. You know, I want to see it closer. You know, there's nothing better than the one in the World Cup when Shabal's there with his hair hanging out everywhere and they eyeball and get closer and closer, right? And that's, you know, they're laying down a challenge. It all got a bit politically correct or all got a bit woke where it's like, you must stay behind the 10-metre line and all you can do is line up on the 10-metre line and stand there and watch it. Let them, as long as there's no contact, there should be some sort of regulation where you can advance, you can stand there, but no contact between the teams. see the challenge, face the challenge, accept the challenge, lay a challenge back down to them that you ain't backing down, and let's get on with the ruggers. But I love it, and I think the fans love it. Whether you're an England fan, a New Zealand fan, a neutral fan, it's a spectacle that I think has to stay in the game.
Do you know who should do it?
Andy Rowe.
Chandler Cunningham South should step out of the line. He's played over there. He's got history in New Zealand. He looks like the Predator. And we know, at least for the first 20 minutes, he can take a few heads off. Step out the fucking line. Become iconic. And then back it up. Because I think he's the one that could back it up. And again, it's not me trying to be disrespectful towards the Haka. I faced it twice. Loved it. Knew we were going to get our pants pulled down, but absolutely loved it. And I think even though that I said it's been exhausted, the Haka, because they play so many games, imagine how much poorer this game would be without the Haka.
Exactly that. Exactly that. You're right, James.
What are you expecting from the All Blacks then? Because their media, they've been sort of talking them down a bit, haven't they? Quite negative about them.
I listened to a podcast with the great Mills Muliaina, Jeff Wilson, and JK on as well, John Kerwin, and they were talking about the mystique around the All Blacks and the expectation. And listening to them speak, it was almost as if they're expecting not to win every game. I think JK said that he doesn't think the All Blacks will beat Ireland because of the history they've got in the quarterfinal. But the big one was France for them because France have their number. And this is the thing with the All Blacks now. They are being beaten. They got beat by Argentina. I know Argentina are a good team. Now they beat South Africa as well. England run them close in New Zealand in the summer. They're not the team that they were, but they're a team that are in transition. They've got quality players, but there's question marks in that. So you can see why even at home that there's questions within that team, but they made the final of the World Cup. They could have won that World Cup final. They lost their captain, Sam Cane, for a tackle that was a couple of inches too high. This is the All Blacks that we're talking about. And when they click and when they go, my goodness me, can they go? But the names on the list aren't the same. I keep talking about it. It isn't the aura around the All Blacks that it had before because they are, I keep saying it, a team that are in transition with a new coach and with new players and lacking any experience. Like scrum half, Aaron Smith's a massive loss for them. Like I know they've got TJ Perenara, but anyone you speak to, Aaron Smith, best scrum half to have ever played the game, and was that link between your Ardie Surveyor or your number 8 or your Kieran Reid and your Dan Carter. So it's a little bit more bitty and unsure what All Blacks team are going to turn up. They're beatable, but if they click with the back three that they've got as well, they're phenomenal still.
I think the bit of the downside and negativity around New Zealand is more so that they have been, up until the last 2 World Cups, they have always been that team on a pedestal, the best team in the world, haven't they? And they probably went into the 2019 World Cup as still that best team. They beat the Springboks in the group stage. And then obviously got dismantled by England in the semi-final, and South Africa go on to win the World Cup. The World Cup in France 2023, they were nowhere near being the favourites at all, but they still get to a final. But it's, the greatest team in the world for the last 8 years has been South Africa. So that's something that New Zealanders and All Blacks are coming to terms with, because everyone around the world has always held them in that regard as the best team in the world and the barometer isn't them anymore, which probably hurts them a little bit. So that's perhaps fueled a little bit of negativity. But if they're going to do it and prove people wrong, they're doing it the hard way, because they've got England, then Ireland, then France. They've got Italy round 4, but they've got the 3 big ones coming up to the Northern Hemisphere to take on. And if they get 3 wins, and you kind of judge teams on wins and everything like that, as we do with the Springboks, because they're the best team in the world now. In terms of the World Cup wins, they're not the best team in the world on the World Rugby rankings, but they can either, they're going to sink or swim, aren't they? Playing the big 3, and they struggle ordinarily against France over there on this November tour. Historically, Ireland is a huge game, but if England can do a job on them, it just ramps up the pressure on everything. But they are going through a rebuild stage, which, takes time.
And how do England do that, Andrew? Is it the short kicking game? The New Zealand All Black set piece is much better than it has been. So for your casual fan, they've got a wicked scrum now under Jason Ryan. Great line out. And people are going to be thinking or asking themselves going against the All Blacks, is it fire with fire, or is it that short kicking game which we've seen England do against South Africa in the World Cup and were very good at? And they kicked a lot in the World Cup. I know they're adding different layers on in their attack, and we've seen with George Furbank at 15. But at the game at the weekend, how do England win this?
I think you've got to marry up the short kicking game with an attack at pace and an energy and being relentless with that. You go back to the England-Ireland game at Twickenham last year. No one gave England a chance, did they? No one thought England would win by chucking the ball to the edge and playing and stressing Ireland's defence in the wider channels. And that's what England went to. It was way out of their comfort zone for that game because it wasn't what we've seen. If we go back to a kicking game and stay in the fight and just that's all we do, then I think New Zealand soak that up because of their scrum power, because of their line-out dominance now, and the players like Satiti, Ardi Surveyor, Tuipulotu's back, big ball carriers. They've got physicality up front, so we have to test them. Rico Ioane at 13, I think, is a wonderful player. But I also think that is an area that England need to attack, the edge. They're not physical in terms of defensively outside of Rico Ioane. We've got some of our brightest talents in that outside channel. And if Freeman's not touching the ball, if Faye Waboso is not touching the ball, if we're not generating attack and layering attack to get them in positions where they can be threats and just try and stay in an arm wrestle, I don't think we stress the All Blacks enough. So I think we've got to continue in how we try to play and play at a pace with organisation, with width, married with a kicking game from Ben Spencer from our own third, effectively. But in that middle third, you've got to fire shots at New Zealand because that's where teams have put them under the pump over the Autumn Nations. When they lost over the Rugby Championship, when they lost to Argentina played at a pace and had energy in those wider channels and put them under pressure there, and that's where they got gains. So I think England have got to have an attacking mindset to go out there and challenge them and take the game to them, as opposed to just trying to soak up what the All Blacks bring from them, and then go and get after them in defence. Get the blitz into them. Go after them when they're trying to play out of their third. Get turnovers. Be physical. Get the crowd going. And then you'll get Marrow whooping and hollering and, all the boys, Ben Earl giving it the big licks as well. And that builds momentum and confidence, and it will start to make the All Blacks question themselves, and England can get a win that way.
And it's also fair to say that it's Steve Borthwick's honeymoon period is now over.
Yeah.
Right? It's now, I think the England fans expect.
Yeah. I'm looking at this Autumn Nations series and we play New Zealand, then Australia, then South Africa, then Japan. We have to win 3 out of 4 of these games. You're playing South Africa, who are the best team. I believe we can beat all 4 at Twickenham, right? But 3 out of 4 would be success. Let's not forget, Steve Borthwick's got a 54% win ratio, which for any England coach isn't good enough. And I know, with that, we got to a World Cup semi-final and nearly won it. So 54% win success rate for an England head coach isn't good enough. So we have to win 3 out of 4 tests as a minimum requirement. If we win 2, if we just beat Australia and Japan, that ain't good enough. And it's now, as you said, Jim, his honeymoon period's over. He hasn't got the excuses of I've just got new coaches or, I haven't got much time to work with this team. It's you're in charge now. You've been in charge for, 2 years effectively. You've got to produce results, and we've got to see wins, and England have to have aspirations to be the best team in the world. That's a long way off, but there are seeds that show that can happen.
So, lads, predictions. Who wins?
England by 9.
Yes, James.
What were you going to say?
I was going to say England, but not by 9. I was going to say England by 5.
Kickfest.
All these games between England and the All Blacks have historically been really tight. So there's been 2, 3, 4 points in it a lot. So I'm just going a bit more than that. England by 5. Go on, the boys.
Pod.
Rugby pod.